Maya had learned long ago that the best dumpsters were behind the organic grocery stores. The food might be bruised or slightly past its prime, but it was still good. That's why the scene before her made no sense at all. The man in the expensive suit was reaching for something that looked like a perfectly ripe peach, its skin practically glowing in the dim light of the alley. It sat atop a pile of rotting vegetables, completely pristine. Maya had been watching this dumpster for 3 days, and she knew that Peach hadn't been there an hour ago. "Don't eat that." The words burst from her throat before she could stop them. The man froze, Peach halfway to his lips, and turned to stare at the dirty 12-year-old girl emerging from behind a stack of cardboard boxes. "Excuse me?" His tone carried that familiar mix of annoyance and pity that Maya had grown used to over the past 2 years on the streets. "That peach," Maya said, pointing with a trembling finger. "It's wrong. I've been watching. They appear out of nowhere, perfect food in rotting piles. And the rats won't touch them. Rats will eat anything, but they won't go near those." The man laughed, but it was uncertain. "Young lady, I appreciate your concern, but I hardly think." A shadow passed overhead, too fast to track, and Maya felt her skin prickle with goosebumps. The temperature in the alley seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. "Please," she whispered, taking a step forward. "I saw what happened to old Joe when he ate one of their apples. His eyes, they changed. He's not him anymore." Something in her voice must have reached him because the man lowered the peach, looking at it more carefully now. In the fading daylight, Maya could see it more clearly too. The skin wasn't just glowing, it was pulsing, ever so slightly, with a faint bluish tinge. "What in the world?" the man muttered, turning the fruit in his hands. That's when it split open. Not like a normal peach would split along the seam, but like an eye-opening. Tiny, iridescent filaments shot out, wrapping around the man's wrist. He screamed and tried to drop it, but it was already adhering to his skin. Maya did what she had done last time. She pulled the ultraviolet flashlight from her tattered backpack, the one she had stolen from the science supply store after old Joe changed. The beam hit the peach thing, and it let out a high-pitched whine that made her teeth ache. The filaments retracted, and the fruit fell to the ground, shriveling and turning black in seconds. The man stumbled backward, clutching his wrist. Where the filaments had touched him, tiny red welts were already forming. What was that?" he gasped. "They're everywhere now," Maya said, keeping the UV light trained on the withered husk. "All over the city. Perfect food appearing in places where people are desperate enough not to question it. But you're the first person in a suit I've seen try to take one." The man was staring at her now, really seeing her for the first time. "How do you know about this? How did you know the UV light would work?" Maya shrugged. "When you live on the streets, you learn to watch everything. The rats knew first, they always know. Then people started changing. Not many yet, but enough. Their eyes get this film over them, like oil on water. They stop acting like themselves. And they start leaving more of this food around." A siren wailed in the distance, and Maya tensed. She'd learned to be wary of authority long before the strange food started appearing. "I have to go," she said, already backing away. "Wait." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I work at the Center for Disease Control. Please, we need to know more about what's happening." Maya hesitated. The card looked official, but she'd learned the hard way not to trust easily. "If what you're saying is true, if this is happening all over the city." Dr. Chen's voice trailed off as another shadow passed overhead, larger this time. They both looked up, but there was nothing to see except the narrow strip of darkening sky between the buildings. "They're getting bolder," Maya whispered. "They used to only come at night." Dr. Chen held out the card again. "Please. You could help us understand what we're dealing with. And we can help you too. Food, shelter, protection." Maya took the card, but only because she saw genuine fear in Dr. Chen's eyes. The same fear she'd been living with since she first saw old Joe's eyes change. "I'll think about it," she said, slipping the card into her pocket. "But you should go now. They don't like it when people refuse their food. And whatever you do, don't eat anything you find on the street. No matter how hungry you get." As Maya melted back into the shadows of the alley, she heard Dr. Chin calling someone on their phone, voice urgent but hushed. Director? Yes, I know what time it is. Remember those anomalous food poisoning cases I flagged last week? I just had an encounter you need to hear about. No, this can't wait until morning. Because I don't think we're dealing with food poisoning at all. I think we're dealing with something much worse. Maya clutched her UV flashlight tighter and started moving. She needed to warn the others at the camp about the shadows in the sky. And she needed to figure out if she could trust this Dr. Chin. Because Maya had seen 3 more people change yesterday, and she knew in her gut that whatever was happening, it was only the beginning. Above her, something moved through the gathering darkness, its shape briefly blotting out the first emerging stars. Maya pressed herself against the cold brick wall and held her breath until it passed. The thing that looked like a peach had been small, but she'd caught glimpses of what left these shadows, and she knew that somewhere out there, something much, much bigger was waiting to emerge. Dr. Sarah Chin stared at the lab results on her screen, running her hands through her disheveled hair. She hadn't left the CDC facility in 36 hours, not since her encounter with the homeless girl in the alley. The sample she'd managed to collect from the withered peach thing was unlike anything she'd ever seen before. It's not just mimicking cellular structure, she muttered to herself, adjusting the electron microscope's magnification. It's creating perfect replicas of Earth fruits, but with something else hidden inside. Something that can alter human DNA. The door to her lab burst open, making her jump. Dr. Marcus Wong, her colleague in xenobiology, rushed in with a tablet in his hand. Sarah, you need to see this. Reports are coming in from every major city now. London, Tokyo, Mumbai, New York. They're all reporting the same thing. Food appearing out of nowhere, people changing. Sarah pulled up the global incident map on her main screen. Red dots were blooming across every continent like a viral infection visualization. How many confirmed cases? Over 10,000. And those are just the ones we know about. Marcus's voice cracked. The thing is, the changes, they're accelerating. The first victims, they just had that weird eye film the girl told you about. But the newer cases. He handed her his tablet. The video showed a man in a hospital bed. His skin had taken on a metallic sheen, and his movements were jerky, unnatural. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's breath catch. They weren't just filmed over anymore. They were completely black, with occasional ripples of iridescent color moving across their surface. When was this taken? She asked. 2 hours ago. The patient disappeared 10 minutes after this footage was recorded, along with 6 others showing similar symptoms. The hospital's security cameras caught them walking out in perfect synchronization. A soft ping from her computer drew Sarah's attention back to her analysis. The results of the DNA sequencing were finally complete. Marcus, look at this. The foreign material we found in the sample, it's not just changing human DNA. It's networking it. Networking? What do you mean? These altered genes, they're not just mutations. They're more like biological transmitters. Whatever this is, it's not trying to kill us. It's trying to connect us. The lights in the lab flickered, and both scientists looked up instinctively. Through the high windows, they could see the sky had taken on a strange, greenish tinge. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The shadows are getting bigger. Meet me at midnight. Bring UV lights. Lots of them. The girl, Sarah whispered. She's reaching out. Dr. Chin. An intern burst into the lab, face pale. You need to see the news. Now. They rushed to the break room where a small crowd had gathered around the TV. The image showed a massive shape descending through the clouds over Central Park. It was organic yet geometric, like a cross between a jellyfish and a crystal lattice, and it was easily the size of a football field. Similar craft are being reported over major cities worldwide, the news anchor was saying, her voice trembling. The president is expected to address the nation within the hour. Citizens are advised to remain calm and stay indoors. It's a coordinated invasion, Marcus breathed. The food, the changes, it was all preparation. Sarah was already heading for the door, grabbing her coat. Where are you going? Marcus called after her. To meet someone who saw this coming before any of us. Someone who might know how to fight back. She paused in the doorway. And Marcus? Get every UV light you can find from the decontamination units. I have a feeling we're going to need them. As she drove through the darkening streets, Sarah noticed how empty they were. Not just of people, but of the usual homeless population that gathered in this area. They knew something was wrong before anyone else, she realized. Just like the rats. Her phone buzzed again. They're not just in the food anymore. Watch the rain. Sarah looked up through her windshield. The first drops were just beginning to fall, and in the glow of her headlights, she could have sworn they shimmered with an unnatural, bluish gleam. Above the city, the alien ship began to pulse with light, its crystalline surface rippling like liquid metal. And in hospitals, homes, and shelters across the globe, thousands of people with oil-slick eyes turned their faces toward the sky in perfect unison, their minds no longer entirely their own. The real invasion was about to begin, and humanity's best hope might just be a homeless child with a stolen UV flashlight and a desperate plan. Something heavy landed on the roof of Sarah's car with a dull thud. Through the sunroof, she caught a glimpse of what looked like a translucent tentacle beginning to seep through the seals. She slammed on the accelerator, sending whatever it was tumbling off, but she could see more shapes moving in the darkness between the buildings. The city was no longer safe. None of them were. And she had 4 hours until midnight to figure out if she could trust a 12-year-old girl with what might be the fate of human consciousness itself. Maya crouched in the abandoned subway tunnel, surrounded by a dozen other homeless people, all clutching UV flashlights. The tunnel had become their sanctuary after the rain started falling across the city. Above them, the distant rumble of the alien ships mixed with the sound of chaos in the streets. They're in the water system now, old Mike said, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the battery-powered lantern. Tommy saw them putting something in the reservoir last night. That's why we stick to the bottled water we stockpiled, Maya replied, checking her watch. Dr. Chin would be arriving soon if she made it through the increasingly dangerous streets. And remember, if anyone starts showing signs, the eye thing, the metallic skin patches, you tell me immediately. A young woman named Rabbit spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. But why aren't we changing? Everyone else who's been exposed. She left the question hanging. Maya had been wondering the same thing. Something about living on the streets, about their way of life, had made them resistant. But she didn't understand why. The sound of footsteps echoing through the tunnel made everyone tense. Maya raised her UV light, but lowered it when she recognized Dr. Chen's silhouette, accompanied by a man she didn't know. Maya, Dr. Chen called out softly. We made it. This is Dr. Wang. And we've figured something out, something about why you and your people are immune. The scientists approached the group, carrying heavy backpacks that clinked with the sound of glass containers. Dr. Chen's clothes were torn and dirty, and there was a cut above her eye. The streets? Maya asked. Getting worse, Dr. Chen nodded. The changed ones, we're calling them the network now, they're organizing. Moving in groups. Hunting down those who haven't been transformed. Dr. Wang opened one of the backpacks, pulling out various pieces of equipment. But we've made a breakthrough. The alien organism, it doesn't just need human DNA to create its network. It needs specific conditions. Clean systems, regulated body chemistry. What does that mean? Old Mike asked. It means, Dr. Chin explained, that your bodies, adapted to irregular meals, exposure to environmental toxins, varied gut bacteria from food scavenging, they're too chaotic for the organism to establish itself. Your immune systems are essentially too battle-hardened, too unpredictable. Maya processed this information. So living rough actually saved us? Exactly, Dr. Wang said. The organism thrives on the sanitized, regulated bodies of modern urban dwellers. But it can't get a foothold in systems that are too. He searched for a diplomatic word. Dirty? Rabbit offered with a harsh laugh. Guess being street trash finally paid off. A deep, resonant tone began to vibrate through the tunnel, making everyone's teeth ache. Above them, dust filtered down from the ceiling as another alien ship passed overhead. They're dropping something new, Maya said. I can feel it. like electricity in the air. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. Spores. Designed to survive in any environment. They're getting desperate to complete the network. A partially connected human population is unstable. They need everyone or the system fails. Which means we're not just survivors anymore, Dr. Wang added. We're the resistance. The only humans guaranteed to stay human. A child's scream echoed through the tunnel, followed by the sound of running feet. A young boy, no more than 8, burst into their makeshift camp. They're coming. The shiny people, they're in the tunnels. Maya was already moving, organizing their group with practiced efficiency. Rabbit, take the north exit with the kids. Mike, east tunnel with the supplies. Dr. Chen, Dr. Wang, you're with me. Where are we going? Dr. Chen asked, shouldering her backpack. To the old maintenance shaft. There's something I need to show you. I think I know where they're really coming from. As they moved through the darkness, their UV lights cutting bright paths through the gloom, Maya explained what she'd seen 3 nights ago. The pattern in the ship's movements. The way they always seemed to emerge from the same spot, even though they appeared to come from the sky. They're not coming down, she said as they climbed the rusty maintenance ladder. They're coming up. From something deep under the city. Something that's been here a lot longer than we thought. They emerged into an abandoned service room filled with ancient electrical equipment. Maya pointed to the far wall, where a faint bluish light pulsed behind the crumbling concrete. I followed the rats, she explained. They've been avoiding this place for months. And look. She aimed her UV light at the wall. Under the purple glow, intricate patterns became visible, geometric shapes that seemed to shift and move when viewed directly. Dr. Chen's breath caught. These markings, they're identical to the patterns on the ships. How long? Dr. Wang whispered. How long have they been down there, waiting? A deep thrumming began to build, and the patterns on the wall started to glow brighter. Through the concrete, they could hear something massive beginning to move. We need to get back to the others, Maya said urgently. Because whatever's down there, I think it's finally waking up. And we need to be ready. They ran back through the tunnels, the sound of alien machinery growing louder behind them. The real war for Earth was about to begin, and its first battles would be fought not in the streets above, but in the darkness below, where the forgotten people of the city had made their home. And Maya, the girl no one had ever noticed before, would lead them. The makeshift command center in the abandoned subway maintenance office hummed with activity. Maya stood before a wall covered in maps of the city's underground infrastructure, marking patterns with different colored pins. Dr. Chen sat at a salvaged desk nearby, analyzing data on a battery-powered laptop. Another network hub here, Maya said, placing a red pin. They're creating some kind of grid under the city. The networked are drawn to these points like moths to flame. The protein markers in their blood are showing increased synchronization, Dr. Chen added, not looking up from her screen. Whatever consciousness is controlling them, it's getting stronger. 3 weeks had passed since they discovered the alien structure beneath the city. In that time, the world above had changed dramatically. Nearly 60% of the global population had been transformed, their minds linked to the alien network. The remaining humans had either gone into hiding or were desperately trying to maintain some semblance of normal life in protected zones. Rabbit burst into the room, breathing hard. Maya, we've got movement in the north tunnels. Big movement. And you need to see what Tommy found. They followed her through the dimly lit corridors to a larger chamber that had once been a storage area. Tommy, a former chemistry teacher who'd been living rough for 2 years, stood over a makeshift lab setup. On the table lay something that made Maya's skin crawl, a piece of what looked like translucent flesh, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. It fell off one of the networked during their last patrol, Tommy explained. The UV exposure didn't destroy it completely. And watch this. He placed a small piece of the tissue in a petri dish and added a drop of dirty water from a sample bottle. The tissue immediately began to shrivel and turn black. The same thing happens with soil samples from our community gardens, Tommy said. Something about the bacteria, the complex ecosystem in our food and water, it's toxic to them. They can't process natural biodiversity. They need sterility. Dr. Chin was already taking notes. This fits with our immunity theory. Their system requires uniformity, predictability. Our dirty survival has made us incompatible. A low rumble shook dust from the ceiling, and Maya felt that familiar electric tingle in the air that preceded a ship's emergence. But this was stronger than usual. They're trying something new, she said, just as Rabbit's radio crackled to life. Multiple emergence points. Old Mike's voice was urgent. They're breaking through in sectors 3, 7, and 9. And something else is coming up. Something big. Maya was already moving. Dr. Chin, get everything you need from the lab. Tommy, pack up any samples we can't replace. Rabbit, sound the evacuation signal. What about the garden? Rabbit asked. All our food. Leave it. We know where to find more, and they can't use it anyway. Maya grabbed her backpack, already packed for exactly this scenario. Everyone to the backup location we discussed. Move. They rushed through the tunnels, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Behind them, strange lights pulsed through cross corridors, accompanied by sounds that weren't quite mechanical and weren't quite organic. They were nearly to the escape route when they ran into their first group of the networked. 6 figures stood blocking the tunnel, their skin gleaming like polished metal in the beam of Maya's flashlight. Their black eyes rippled with colored patterns, and when they spoke, it was in perfect unison. The resistance ends today, they said. Your biological variants will be corrected. Join the Unity. Maya didn't hesitate. She threw her newest invention, a UV grenade cobbled together from salvaged tanning bed parts. The burst of purple light filled the tunnel, and the network screamed in a single voice, their outer layer of metallic skin blistering and peeling. Run! Maya shouted, but Dr. Chun grabbed her arm. Wait, she said. Look at their eyes. The networked were writhing in pain, but for a moment, just a moment, their eyes had cleared. The black film had receded, showing normal human eyes beneath, filled with terror and confusion. They're still in there, Maya whispered. The real people, they're trapped. Another explosion rocked the tunnel, closer this time. Through a crack in the ceiling, they could see something massive moving above, not the usual ship design, but something more organic, like a giant amoeba made of crystal and light. Maya, Dr. Chin said urgently, the UV light didn't just hurt them, it disrupted the network connection. Temporarily, but it worked. If we could find a way to amplify it, to broadcast it somehow. The old radio tower, Rabbit interrupted. The one on Mount Wilson. If it's still standing. Maya nodded, her mind already racing ahead. We'd need to modify it, create some kind of UV pulse broadcaster. But the tower's above ground in the open. And the network would sense our intentions the moment we got close, Dr. Chin added. Unless they were distracted, Maya finished. She looked back at the recovering networked, their skin already beginning to recrystallize. We need to show them something they want more than us. Something that threatens their entire system. She pulled out the sample bottle of dirty water from Tommy's lab. We need to show them what real biological chaos looks like. On a massive scale. The ground shook again, and through the cracks, they could see more of the crystal amoeba things moving through the streets above. The aliens were done being subtle. They were making their final push to complete the network. But they didn't know what Maya and her people had learned in their years of survival, that sometimes the only way to win was to embrace the chaos. And they were about to unleash more chaos than these order-loving invaders could handle. Get everyone to the backup base, Maya told Rabbit. Dr. Chin, Dr. Wong, and I need to make a trip to the university's microbiology lab. It's time to show these aliens what Earth's smallest life forms can really do. The microbiology lab at the university was eerily quiet, its pristine surfaces gleaming under emergency lighting. Maya watched as Dr. Chin and Dr. Wong worked rapidly, combining samples from the underground community's water supplies with various bacterial cultures. Are you sure about this? Dr. Chen asked, not looking up from her microscope. Once we start this process, there's no going back. We'll be releasing evolved strains of some of the most aggressive soil bacteria Earth has ever seen. The aliens want uniformity? Maya replied, keeping watch at the door. Let's show them what Earth's biodiversity really looks like. A distant explosion rattled the windows. Through the lab's high windows, they could see the crystalline amoeba creatures sliding between buildings, their surfaces reflecting the fires that now burned across parts of the city. Above them, the alien ships moved in new patterns, more frenzied than before. They know we're planning something, Dr. Wong said, carefully sealing another container of their modified bacterial culture. The network is agitated. Look at how the ships are moving. Maya's radio crackled. Maya, come in. It was Rabbit's voice, tense with urgency. They found the backup base. We're evacuating to Site C, but that's not the worst part. The big thing under the city? It's starting to wake up. All of it. As if in response, the ground began to tremble, not in sharp bursts like before, but in a continuous, building vibration. The metal fixtures in the lab started to resonate, creating an otherworldly hum. How much longer? Maya asked the scientists. 5 minutes to finish the final batch, Dr. Chen replied. But Maya, getting to the radio tower? That's going to be impossible now. The streets are swarming with the networked, and those new crystalline entities are. We're not using the streets, Maya interrupted. She pulled out a map marked with red lines. The maintenance tunnels we've been using? They're not the only thing under this city. There's something older. Something deeper. Dr. Wong looked up from his work. The old pneumatic mail system? But that's been sealed for decades. And it runs directly under the Mount Wilson facility, Maya said. The aliens didn't map it because it's been dormant so long. It's our secret path right to their weak point. Another tremor, stronger this time, and through the lab windows, they saw something that made their blood run cold. The ground in the university quad was rising, pushed up from below by something massive. As they watched, a crystalline structure the size of a skyscraper began to emerge, its surface covered in the same geometric patterns they'd seen in the maintenance room. That's their central node, Dr. Chin whispered. The one that's been down there all along, waiting. It's finally showing itself. Maya's radio crackled again. This time it was old Mike. Maya, the networked, they're changing again. Their skin, it's going transparent. We can see right through them, see the light moving inside them like fiber optics. The network is reaching its final stage, Dr. Wong said. Once that central node fully emerges, it will broadcast a signal strong enough to transform everyone within a 1,000-mile radius. No immunity will be strong enough to resist. Then we move now, Maya decided. She began carefully packing the bacterial cultures into a specialized containment unit. Dr. Wong, get these to the tower. Use the pneumatic tunnels. Rabbit's team has cleared them. Dr. Chin, you're with me. Where are we going? Maya checked her UV light's battery and pulled out a new device, something they'd built using salvaged parts from the university's physics lab. We're going to give that central node something to think about. Something that will keep it too busy to stop Dr. Wong's broadcast. The quantum frequency disruptor? Dr. Chin asked. But we haven't tested it. We don't even know if. We know they operate on perfect synchronization, Maya said. So let's introduce some chaos into their system. Right at the source. They felt another tremor, and through the windows, they could see the crystalline tower had risen higher, its top now lost in the low clouds. All across the city, the networked were walking toward it, drawn by some silent call. They're gathering for the final transformation, Dr. Chin realized. Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now. Maya nodded, her face set with determination. Doctor, how would you like to help me hack an alien hive mind? The ground shook again as they gathered their equipment, and through the trembling glass, they could see more crystalline structures beginning to rise from the earth. The aliens' long-dormant seeds were finally blooming, reaching for the sky with geometrically perfect forms that defied earthly architecture. But they had forgotten something important about Earth. Here, perfection was never the natural state. Here, life thrived on imperfection, on mutation, on the beautiful chaos of evolution. And Maya, a girl who had survived by embracing that chaos, was about to remind them of that fact. As they descended into the ancient tunnels beneath the university, Maya thought about all the people trapped in the network, their minds buried under alien control. She thought about old Joe, about the man with the peach, about all the others who had been taken. "We're coming," she whispered. "Hold on just a little longer. We're bringing the chaos back." The ancient pneumatic tunnel echoed with Maya and Dr. Chen's footsteps as they raced toward the central node. Above them, they could feel the vibrations of thousands of the networked converging on the crystalline tower. Their headlamps illuminated walls covered in a thin sheen of bioluminescent growth. The alien influence had spread even here. 5 minutes until Dr. Wang reaches the broadcast position, Dr. Chen said, checking her tablet. "The bacterial cultures are stable. If we can keep the central node distracted." "We will," Maya replied, adjusting the quantum frequency disruptor strapped to her back. The device hummed softly, its salvaged components barely contained within its makeshift housing. "You saw how they reacted to the UV light. They can't handle disruption. And we're about to give them more than they can process." They reached a maintenance shaft that led upward, toward the base of the crystalline tower. As they began to climb, Maya's radio crackled. "Maya," Rabbit's voice was barely audible through the interference. "The networked, they're all moving in sync now. And their skin, it's gone completely transparent. We can see their organs transforming, becoming something else." "Hold your position," Maya responded. "Just keep them away from the tower's power source for a few more minutes." They emerged from the shaft into what had once been a subway maintenance room. Now, the walls were covered in crystalline growth that pulsed with internal light. Through a crack in the ceiling, they could see the tower looming above them, its surface alive with geometric patterns that seemed to move with their own intelligence. "Look," Dr. Chin whispered, pointing to the patterns. "They're not just decorative. They're data streams. The whole tower is one massive processing unit." Maya was about to respond when a voice spoke, not from any specific direction, but seemingly from the crystals themselves. It was a chorus of voices, all speaking in perfect unison. "The chaotic one arrives," the voices said. "The one who resists unity. Why do you fight against perfection?" Maya stood her ground, even as the crystal growths around them began to shift and flow. "Because perfection is stagnation. Life needs chaos to evolve, to grow, to become something new. Evolution is inefficient," the voices replied. "We offer transcendence. Your species will become part of something greater. Already, your kind embraces our unity." The crystals parted, revealing a horrifying sight. Humans, or what had once been humans, were being absorbed into the tower's structure. Their transparent forms were interweaving with the crystalline matrix, their transformed organs pulsing with the same rhythmic light that flowed through the alien structure. "That's not transcendence," Maya said, her voice hard. "That's extinction. You're not elevating humanity, you're erasing it." Her radio crackled again. In position, Dr. Wang's voice came through. "Tower's transmission equipment is ready. Bacterial cultures are set for dispersal. Awaiting your signal." Maya looked at Dr. Chen, who nodded and began entering commands into her tablet. The quantum frequency disruptor hummed louder, its pitch rising. "Last chance," Maya called out to the voices. "Release your hold on humanity, or we show you what real chaos looks like." The crystal growth surged toward them, but Maya was ready. She activated the disruptor, and the effect was immediate. The perfect geometric patterns in the tower began to distort, their rhythms falling into discord. The unified voices broke apart into a cacophony of individual screams. "Now, Dr. Wang!" Maya shouted into her radio. Broadcast. High above, the modified radio tower came to life, sending out pulses of UV light amplified by the bacterial culture's bioluminescent properties. The light swept across the city in waves, causing the crystalline structures to vibrate at conflicting frequencies. The networked in the streets below began to convulse, the transparent shells of their transformation cracking and falling away. Through the gaps in the ceiling, Maya could see the alien ships above the city starting to move erratically, their perfect formations breaking apart. But the central node was fighting back. The crystal growths around Maya and Dr. Chen became more aggressive, trying to entrap them. The voices returned, now discordant and angry. "You cannot break the unity," they held. "We have waited millennia for this convergence. We will not be denied by primitive chaos." Maya pulled out her final weapon, a canister of the concentrated bacterial culture. "You forgot something important about Earth," she said. "Life here doesn't just embrace chaos, it thrives on it." She threw the canister at the base of the crystal formation where it merged with the tower. The bacterial culture, enhanced by Dr. Chen's modifications, began to eat away at the alien structure with impossible speed. The perfect crystalline surfaces began to decay, becoming cloudy and unstable. "Dr. Chen, get back to the tunnel," Maya shouted as the tower above them began to shudder. The scientist hesitated only a moment before running for the maintenance shaft. Maya stood her ground, increasing the disruptor's power to maximum. The device was growing hot against her back, its components starting to fail, but she could see it working. The tower's patterns were breaking down completely now, its light becoming erratic. Throughout the city, the networked were falling to their knees, the alien influence being burned away by the combination of UV light and quantum disruption. The ships above were descending erratically, some crashing into each other as their control systems failed. The crystal growths around Maya began to shatter, unable to maintain their structure under the assault of chaos theory made manifest. She could feel the tower above starting to collapse. "Maya, run!" Dr. Chen's voice called from the shaft. But Maya had one last thing to say to the aliens. "This is humanity," she shouted at the failing tower. "We're messy, we're chaotic, we're imperfect. And that's what makes us strong." She finally turned and ran for the shaft as the tower began to collapse in earnest. Behind her, the unified voices broke apart completely, becoming a dying scream that faded into silence. Maya barely made it to the tunnel before the maintenance room collapsed. She and Dr. Chen ran through the darkness as the rumbling above continued, the sound of the alien structures falling marking the end of their attempted conquest. Hours later, Maya stood with her makeshift family, Rabbit, Old Mike, Tommy, Dr. Chen, and Dr. Wang, watching the sun rise over the changed city. The crystalline structures had crumbled to dust, leaving only debris as evidence of their existence. All across the world, similar reports were coming in. The networked were recovering, their humanity restored. "What do you think they'll say about us?" Rabbit asked, watching emergency crews helping people in the streets below. "About how it was the homeless who saved humanity?" Maya smiled, thinking about how much had changed. "Maybe they'll remember that strength doesn't always look like what you expect. That sometimes the people society forgets are the ones who remember what's most important." "And what's that?" Dr. Chen asked. Maya looked at her found family, the people who had survived together, fought together, and won together. That being human means being perfectly imperfect. And that's exactly how it should be. Above them, the sky was clear and blue, free of alien ships and crystalline structures. Earth was still dirty, chaotic, and wonderfully imperfect. Just the way Maya liked it.